Afternoon, guys. Can I draw this afternoon's meeting to order, please? Can we have apologies in order of business?
Apologies, Chair, from Councillors Devink and Beattie, and the order of business as published. Okay,
any declarations of interest? Okay, item 4, performance reports. Item 4E, commercial operations. Ricky?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just point out a few things that I feel should be brought to committee's attention here, and then happy to take any questions. Under section 1 on the front page, Waste Services General, just to bring members' attention to the second point, we have a current contract with NES, which members may be aware that Scottish Borders intended to have their own facilities to deal with their waste stream, building it courtesy of NES. We have a short-term contract until Miller Hill is up and running. And there was a point in time where we may have considered that going with NES long-term might have been the preferred solution. Unfortunately, recently, Scottish Borders Council have terminated their contract with NES, primarily due to difficulties that NES had in securing the necessary licences. So it was perhaps fortuitous that the Council have gone down the road of going with Miller Hill. However, NES have confirmed that they're still in a position to offer us and to continue to offer us that short-term contract. And what they are looking at is the potential to take advantage of a facility just over the border to allow us to completely move away from landfill in the short term and have that residual waste treated. So I'm more than happy to update members as and when we get further information on that. Moving on in terms of waste, just to highlight the fact that the food waste plant is now well up and running in terms of construction. At a site visit 2 weeks ago, and it will certainly be available when Midlothian, at the end of this financial year, start to roll out its food waste collection service. Moving down, just to kind of highlight one or two other things, in terms of the road network, the previous decision of Council to have a 20-mile-an-hour zone in Last Wade, that's now due to be implemented towards the end of this month. We have the traffic regulation order well advanced, and we have the markings, etc., all planned, and we've kept the local community there advised of our plans that will happen by the end of this month. So perhaps, Chair, I'll pause there and happy to take any questions on the rest of the report.
Thanks, Ricky. Questions, Jim?
Ricky, just something you mentioned there about the potential of NES, I think you said, taking the residual waste over the border for disposal. Would that type of thing offset the carbon cost of the actual transfer or transport for doing that, taking the residual waste that far?
It's probably a fairly marginal decision. It's based on two things. Obviously, the reduction in carbon rather than landfilling it as we currently do and having it treated. But the other thing to be aware of is that currently we transport our waste. At the moment it's bulked at Newton Grange and then it's transported through to a landfill site in the west of Scotland. So it's a marginal decision at best, I would suggest.
Can I just ask a supplementary? I must be missing something, but I don't quite understand why we're homing in on that, bearing in mind that we are actually going to divert our residual waste to the new energy from waste plant. I don't think it was going to be 2020 before that came on stream. I thought it was coming on stream before that. So I'm just a wee bit puzzled about why we would want to do a deal to extend it, then to take stuff across the border. I mean, I just think in whole carbon, the whole idea about the proximity principle, which was argued out over many, many years between government, SEPA and local authorities, we kind of lose that if we're taking it even further and further away. I'd just like clarification on that, because I genuinely don't understand that.
Yeah. As things stand, we have a contract with NES, which is a flexible contract. The flexibility was built in to allow us to start the contract at Miller Hill as soon as it was ready. What NES have done is they've approached us to say that there is an opportunity rather than have the waste landfilled between now and 2017 when Miller Hill's on stream, that if we want to do that, and the other thing is that it would be cost neutral to the council. So there are potential benefits in the short term, but there is no risk to us.
To that, I mean, I think at the last, I don't know if it was the last or the last but one councils, the report came up where in actual fact the department stroke section or whatever had forgot to factor in the cost of that. If you remember, there was a shortfall in budgetary terms. I mean, how does that then mean that it can be cost neutral, given that in fact there was an additional cost to the council for actually having this contract in the first place?
Sorry, there is, what I was meaning by cost neutral is that the price that we are paying just now, which is the price we've always paid, there is no difference if NES decide that, and with our agreement, that we take that to treatment rather than landfill.
Okay. Any other questions for Ricky? Brian?
Network Rail delay in handing over the bridge in item 1, Waste Services General. There's a few people asked me about the reopening of the road to the Cockatoo. You know, is this all part of the same kind of delays, and is there an anticipated date for that? On point 3, when you jump to, sorry, that was point 2. On point 3, on the road network, Council approved the extension of 20 MPH zones adjacent to all nursery schools. Can you confirm that that includes the nursery at Gardner Place in Newton Grange?
In terms of the first point, Councillor, I can tell you that there is actually a meeting tomorrow between Network Rail and other parties involved to resolve some of the issues in relation to the A6106. So that means being taking place tomorrow. Without kind of giving you a specific in terms of whether that particular nursery is included, what I can say is that all nurseries should have a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So what I will do is I'll go away from here, I'll just double check that and I'll come back to you.
Thanks, Ricky.
Hi, Ricky. Just want to speak to the dropped target in terms of the percentage of the footpath network that's been resurfaced.
Yeah, what we have is, obviously you'll be aware that we have a capital allocation. What we've done is that there's one or two areas where we've spent a bit more on road network repairs. The problem when you come along to do repairs on a road is that whilst you may envisage a type of repair from a visual inspection, it's only once you start to dig in. So there are a couple of locations, one of which, for example, is Tyne Head, where there were a number of roads that were damaged as part of the rail works, and without going into too much detail, we are trying to recover some of that cost. But unfortunately, where we may have thought that we would get away with a certain depth, it's been increased. So we've spent more money in some of these locations to do a more effective repair that will ensure it lasts the length of time that we would envisage. That's where the balance has changed.
Again, I appreciate the limits on what you might be able to say, but if there is a recouping of some of those costs, I note from the implication of what you're saying that some of the capitals had to come out of the footpath budget. If we do recoup those costs, will the footpath budget be replenished so that perhaps work there could catch up with where you might have hoped it would have been?
There's two comments I'd like to make to that, Councillor. One is, yeah, that gives us that opportunity and that flexibility. The other thing for members to be aware of, that there is actually an outstanding action on me to come forward to Council with a report highlighting the condition of the footpath network generally and a condition assessment. So we're actually working on that report, and that report will come forward to members before the summer recess for consideration.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Ricky. Now we move on to item 4A2, Finance and Integrated Services. Gary?
Thanks, Chair. The papers in front of you set out the key achievements of the service over the Q3 and covering areas around finance and the financial strategy, our people strategy, procurement and our support of the transformation agenda. I'll just touch on a few of those successes. We've now got a revenue budget agreed and in place for next financial year. We had moving to people strategy, a very successful Celebrating Midlothian event held in November, a good attendance at the Money Museum. We're working on sickness absence, and members will be aware of from previous council meetings, the discussions around the performance in new buyers. Towards the end of last year, we managed to secure as a council Healthy Working Lives Gold Award, which is our first year of accreditation at that high level. And we continue to work both across all services really to help encourage recruitment and positive destinations in terms of entry-level jobs for the council. We had another successful year in terms of our procurement capability, scoring 65%, which is a marked increase. If members might recall, we started back in 2010, we were down languishing around 19%, so we've made real improvements in that whole service. Our focus in procurement now is on purchase to pay, putting in systems that make it easier to buy the right things on the right contracts and secure the best price, and also make it easier for our staff to actually transact. We continue as a service to go through fundamental change through the ISS review. This got a savings target over 3 years of over £2 million. We spent a lot of time in the tail end of last year looking at the structures within the services, and we're a significant way through that and securing savings from change, and that follows on from last summer's management review. That's a very swift run through some of the successes. In terms of the challenges, you wouldn't be surprised that I would come here today and say the continuing challenge, and the biggest one is to secure financial sustainability. Again, budget projections and commentaries continue to highlight that all public services and all councils will continue to suffer significant financial challenges addressing and delivering the services that the communities expect, dealing with increased demographic pressures and school roles within either cash constrained or cash reducing budgets. And you'll continue to see me back in the chamber at council meetings updating you on the position and the approach we're taking to resolve that. We are working away in terms of securing financial close for the New Battle High School project. That has the complication around the European accounting rules in ESA 10, but that's something that, in terms of the team, we're supporting our colleagues in Gary's area to make sure that once that accounting issue is resolved, we're ready to close the contract and continue to support the transformation programme. Other emerging challenges, it's still there, but not maybe as big an issue as we first thought. The issue of holiday pay, there's still some further clarification which will ultimately come out of the employment tribunal system in terms of where that potential liability ultimately ends up, and it's something we're watching carefully. Again, transformation, we've still got a number of changes to make in the service, still some structures to review, and also some key projects to finalise. So purchase to pay, we're currently in secondary schools and primary schools rolling that out, but we've still got a number of services to go, and we still want to strengthen our contract and supplier management, which has been reliant on packages that the Scottish Government have been putting into their national online tools, and that will help us as managers make sure that once we've procured the contract, we're able to ensure that the supplier delivers what they say that they will deliver. So I suppose I'd summarise in terms of the challenges around financial close on the high school, financial sustainability, driving change in the service and across the council, and then just continuing to monitor and invest in our people. So happy to pause there and take any questions.
Thanks, Gary. Questions, comments? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. On page 20 of the agenda at the top, item 2, making the best use of our resources, it's got performance against revenue budget with a number of figures. Now, I'm guessing here that is the level of reserves. And if so, why do we use that as a measure of performance against revenue budget. I would have thought anticipated surplus or deficit at the end of the year would have been a better measure.
No, you're wrong. That's not the level of reserves. That's the projected expenditure for the service. And the red, if you're in colour, highlights that I'll be overspent. We reported to Council on the 17th of February the latest financial stats. One of the reasons for the overspend is we have an uninsured loss around an employer's liability claim, which I think was in the region of a couple of £100,000. So it's a historic liability that's now going to hit our books. But I'm happy to, the latest figures were in the February Council report, but I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Any other questions? Gary, can I just ask you about, and people strategy achievement, item C, culture change, project plan to reduce sickness absence in areas of greatest need. Is that just relating to your service?
Chair, no. That's our colleagues in the OD and HR team who are working across all services to look at how we can reduce sickness absence levels and make sure we've got effective interventions in place. So that includes the work that the team are doing at the moment, supporting Alison White within New Buyers Care Home, for example, has been the most high-profile area, and there's some really good work being done on that so far, and I'm sure Alison will report that back through to committee and council in due course.
She has, and the reality is I would have still seen that as being in challenges rather than successes, because while it's reduced, it's not reduced anything to the area where we would expect it to be, I wouldn't have thought.
You're right, it will continue to be an achievement, as in we've made some headway, but there's still a long way to go in terms of, and it's something that will always be on the list of things to do.
Okay, Kenny?
Just picking up on another challenge, you obviously touched on the New Battle High School replacement and financial close. Is there any update that you would want to give to us today on whether we still expect to get construction underway? And I think summer was the last update.
I think I'm fortunate my colleague Gary Sherritt's here, who knows much more than I do.
Cover that now or cover it in my own report in a wee second, but if I do it just now it'll save me time. The position is that we are continually meeting with Hubco and with the SFT to resolve the position on the contract itself and indeed the ISA 10 scenario. On the contract itself, we are closing in on financial close. We anticipate that we will have that during March and be in a position to put that to the financiers, Nord, who put the package together for Hubco on our behalf, just at the end of that period, and then be in a position to start on site immediately we get conclusion on the ISA 10 scenario. On the ISA 10 scenario, we are not just in touch with the SFT but also with the Scottish Government, and the indications are that they are getting towards a conclusion, but there is no end date as yet.
Any other questions, Brian?
I just follow on that. Has there been on cost from the contractor with this delay?
That question as yet is not answered, Brian, because we don't have an end date. What we've asked the contractor to do at this point in time is freeze the subcontractor packages, because it's all work packages it's made up of, as we go back to each of the subcontractors and ask them to extend that to the maximum that they can at this point in a competitive market. Contractors will take a view on that, and usually that's a 3-month period. Given that this problem came around about January time, I think probably the furthest we can push that is to the summer recess. Beyond that, I really think we'll be looking at considerable increases. If we can resolve this March-April time, we might see smaller increases. That said, we have gone back to both the SFT and the Scottish Government and asked that if we are hit with increases, of none of which are our making, would the Government and SFT underwrite those? We haven't got the answer, but they're working on that solution.
Thanks, Gary. Any other questions for Gary Fairley?
Well, it's to do that one. See, when you say that you've been in touch with the Scottish Government, the SFT, see if they would underwrite that. Are they talking about their contribution to the Scottish Government's contribution or ours as well?
No, we've made it clear that that shouldn't be impacting the council. That should be impacting the contribution.
Okay. Are we all finished with financial services and Gary? Thanks, Gary. Now move on to item 4.3, property and facilities management. Gary, share it.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to repeat myself on the new battle item, but I'll pick out one or two of the other highlights from the front page and then take questions on the remainder of the report. In terms of the asset management rationalisation, you'll see from the progress on the lower floors in this building, we are making reasonable progress there. We're slightly behind on where we plan to be on that particular floor, but we will catch up, and we're on course to be finished for summer in terms of the refurb of Midlothian House and Cross Street. The other items I want to pick up on are the sport and leisure strategic review that we're undergoing at the present time. And this is really to bring to everybody's attention that we are looking at the strategy for how sports development and physical activity impacts not just sport and leisure, but also education, health service and social work and the like. So it's a cross-directorate exercise, and the initial meeting, including Sports Scotland, the NHS and the Council, takes place tomorrow. The intention is to make sure that that is concluded this calendar year. It's a long exercise because it's the number of participatory bodies that are in that. Other items, just to update rather than embellish the management restructure, we have now gone through consultations with staff and trade unions, and we're moving on to the interview process during March and April for that. New battle we've touched on, the Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre. I just want to be making this meeting aware that we have reached agreement with the Bright Sparks client that the building that we've designed is to their requirements at this stage, and that we have agreement that that is within the cost package that we have available to us, and the intention is to move from the stage we're at now, which is design, into gaining building warrants, demolition warrants, and indeed planning consent. And then finally, on Paradise and Roslin Primary Schools, again the update is that we've now engaged with the design team there, and regardless of the ISA 10 protracted nature of the contract for New Battle, we are still allowed to crack on with the design element of these two schools, in the anticipation that it will all be resolved by the time we get anywhere near starting on site there. And the public meetings for the planning notice take place on the 17th and 19th of March.
Thanks, Gary. Any questions, comments? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you have a cost package for the Bonnyrigg Leisure Centre, and it refers here to a budget. Can you tell me how much that is?
The budget's made up of the surplus that we had from the provisional sums that were held back from the last raid project, which included obviously the demolition of that building and other works, and the sale of the Cockpen site. The exact figure I can give you, but I don't have that on the top of my head.
Brian?
Phase 2 housing layouts for the housing at Green Hall have been drafted following the completion of the site investigation works. We've had plans for housing there for a while, and I thought a lot of the site investigation works would have been done, previously. And I think this seems to be as a reason for a bit of delay. And what we try to do as much as possible is fast track the Green Hall project, and just seeing if there was any overlap in that. And on sport and leisure, when the harmonisation of fees and charges plus grant reviews have been monitored by the council, but what effective consultation are we actually doing with the groups that are affected? I can go back to the case of the Phoenix Club, which had no prior consultation into the withdrawal of service in kind, and obviously that creates a lot of animosity within that organisation and the community. And I just want to make sure there is effective consultation with the voluntary sector, because some of it can be a double whammy to them if they've had their grant reduced and their fees increased at the same time. You may be undermining the sustainability of that community group, and also we can look at the outcomes of, is that a service that we depend on, and who else is going to do the service if that happened. That outcome should be looked at as well in the sort of financial monitoring of the whole scenario and sustainability. Some of these voluntary sector organisations, many of them of which are very fragile, that the drop in grant could be a real detriment to even their will to fight on. And I just make sure that there is real consultation getting done, and just want to know who's actually driving this consultation.
Thanks, Brian. In terms of the first question, which was to do with the site in Greenhall, there's three parts to that site. The first part was always going to be developed, and that was for 35 units, and that has a site investigation. But because we were looking for a replacement for the 64 units that came from new buyers, we've had to go into the second part of the site, which is a further 26 units, and that's where the extra site investigation works have been required. Regardless of that, we've been moving on with the design works, and the grouting works for the remedial element of that should be starting imminently, with a site start there programmed at this point in time for summer. Second part of your question, the report here is looking at the effect on sport and leisure, not on the services to the community agenda, which is a separate one. The report that I've put forward is looking at the effect on the budget that sport and leisure have. So the fees and charges saw a drop in income in certain areas and a rise in income in other areas. And what we were asked to do was look at how was that affecting the overall budget and the targets that we were working to within the year. During the end of March into April, we will have a half-year picture of that, and the intention was to come back with a report at that point in time. In terms of the effect on voluntary groups and the likes, that's the Services to Communities Board, which are looking at that and dealing with the outcome and the effect on both the grants and the charging side of things. That's not covered in this report.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Any other questions or comments? Gary, thank you. Move on to our last item for today, and that is Midlothian Council and Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this report brings together the information which is contained in the various service reports, which I think you've had a very full discussion about today, which I think has been very positive. So I don't intend really to go through the text at the beginning. As I say, it's a summation of the outcomes and a summation of the challenges which you've been discussing this morning and again this afternoon. I guess I'd simply seek to re-emphasise, Gary Fairley's point about the future projections in terms of the finance that will be available to us and the demographic cost and service pressures that we have to set against that. Means that whilst we have for a number of years now been going through a period of transformational change, there's a lot more to come, and there will need to be a lot more in terms of ensuring that we're driving value for our service users, taking out costs which are unnecessary, working with our communities and with our partners in order to ensure that we are improving services and creating efficiencies. I think it would be remiss of me not to say something about that. I suppose the other thing I'd just touch on, it's not in the report itself, but relating to a recent discussion I had with the chair of the Local Area Network. And you'll recall the Local Area Network is the organisation that puts together the Council's annual Scrutiny plan. So it brings together the Care Inspectorate, Education Scotland, Audit Scotland, etc. And certainly the formal report from them will come, I think it's to May's Council. We're not yet in receipt of that for 15-16, but the comment was essentially that all of our regulated services, that's adult, children's education, housing, are either performing very strongly or improving, which as the Chief Executive is a really positive thing to hear. Now, that is not a message that means that somehow we can relax, because I think the challenges we face are absolutely enormous, and some of these services may be improving, but we know they've still got further to go. So I think we need to keep our foot in the pedal, if that's not an inappropriate phrase. In terms of the summary report at the end here, I mean, earlier today we, Chair, you raised the issue of complaints and the fact that these were shown as red in I think nearly all the service reports for Q3. And the explanation was, as is set out here, that there was an issue in relation to the the restructuring and the need to sort out the IT that supported that. Kevin assured us this morning that that has been resolved, so the figures should improve. I think there's a broader issue here about how, as a council, we deal with complaints, and it's something which I've quite openly said in the past I've not been altogether satisfied with. And I think that in the new Housing and Customer Services division, that is one of our priorities, to ensure that it's not just about timescales. As Kevin said this morning, it's about the quality of our response, and it's also about learning from complaints, particularly so that we can eliminate repeat errors which don't serve our customers well and which cost the council money. So that whole principle of getting things right first time is very important in terms of improving performance and indeed taking cost out of the system. The other two indicators I just pick up on in terms of the overall performance, and I'm on pages 58 and 59 here. One is the sickness issue, and you'll note that we are on target. Indeed, in the following report on benchmarks, you'll see that we, relative to other councils, we perform quite well, but we're still very conscious that there's specific areas in each division, in fact, where we need to improve the record when it comes to sickness. And on the following page, the invoice processing were slightly below target. Members will recall this was an area where we, for many years, performed poorly, and it's really only in the last 1 or 2 years that we've finally sorted out systems to improve performance. We are slightly below target this year. I think that if you look at the detailed performances across the divisions, there are 2 areas where we're under 90%. In fact, the 2 gentlemen sitting to my left are responsible for these 2 areas, and there's specific reasons set out in their reports as to why we're slightly below target in that regard, but that continues to be an area of focus. So as I say, Chair, most of this covered in the various service reports, but happy to take any overall questions or questions that remain from earlier discussions.
Any questions for the Chief Executive, Brian?
On positive destinations, we've discussed this quite a bit, and we're very happy to see the big increase in positive destinations for our school pupils. I'd like to know more, though. I'd like to know more about the quality of these destinations. When we hear so often that so many under-25s are in employment of below the living wage, percentages well over 75%, the people in 25 years and younger are actually, basically still on minimum wage kind of standards, and so many of them are below the living wage. I would like to see the living wage agenda included in the actual scrutiny of the statistics. If somebody leaves school even early to go shelf stacking in a supermarket and they do it all right, are they just stuck there, a dead end kind of job? But if you look at people who go into jobs that are paying the living wage and more, they tend to be proper jobs where they've got a good chance of development and career within that. But also, it would be very informative to hear it per school kind of figures, and also very informative for Midlothian statistics, because that's a good overlap into economic development as well of our council area. And again, I would extend that to a Scottish kind of criteria, so we could actually compare authority with the benchmarking. Have they gone into employment? Have they gone into employment that also is paying the living wage? It would be a very useful statistic for many councils to benchmark with, and a good indication of the quality of the employment opportunities young people are taking.
Yeah, I'm sure the Chief Executive will be able to give you an overview and maybe some of the detail of that, Brian, but I did say at the start of this, if we had detailed questions like that, to try and do it while the professional officers were here, and certainly education officers were here. So I'll ask Kenneth to try and answer any of the parts he can.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the figure that we report is a figure that's measured by Skills Development Scotland, is provided for all councils, so it is comparable across all councils, and we certainly have per school figures there in the public domain, and they show how each school is performing in relation to, you know, employment, higher education, further education, volunteering, etc., other positive destinations, and that can certainly be shared with you. In Midlothian, I mean, the overall figures are interesting because in terms of higher education, we are still the lowest performer in Scotland in terms of percentage going into higher education. And it takes us right back to that long-term issue about driving educational attainment in our schools. And whilst I feel that in the most recent period we've made some good progress in that, there's still clearly more to be done. In terms of employment, we've got the highest percentage going into employment of any council in Scotland. And that's, I think, you know, testament to some of the work we're doing in terms of working with employers. In terms of positive destinations, you know, council staff working on are try very hard to get people into destinations that are not just positive from a statistical point of view, but positive from a sustainable point of view. So whilst I don't have that information to hand about how many are in, you know, for example, destinations that don't pay living wage, I'm not sure whether we can easily access that information. I'll certainly ask the question. Certainly the effort is to try and ensure that they're in sustainable employment wherever possible.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kenneth? Okay, sorry, there is one other item that I forgot about, and that's the local government benchmarking framework results. Kenneth, I think you're going to take us through that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose on a first looking at this, it perhaps seems like a reasonably positive report. We've got, you know, 55% for indicators in the upper half and 45% in the lower half, more in the top quartile than the bottom quartile. I have to say, I think it's a pretty mixed report. Really, I suppose as Chief Executive, I'm not altogether satisfied with it. And I'll say a little bit more about that. First, to say that, you know, in the appendices, what you have in Appendix 1 is an analysis of those in the top and bottom quartiles, and then you have a fuller analysis showing the position of all the benchmark indicators in the second appendix. This isn't set out in the report, but you can look at these indicators and divide them into really three categories, I think. Some are measures of service performance, some are measures of financial performance, and others are customer satisfaction measures. And actually, if you look in at that detail, it's very interesting, because if you look at those that are really about operational performance, then by a factor of 2 to 1, they're in the top half in terms of operational performance. If you look at financial performance, they're very mixed. Now, I think some of these relate to, on some of the indicators, we're always going to struggle as a small council, I think, on the financial performance. But if you look at the customer satisfaction ones, with the exception of the customer satisfaction measure for parks and open spaces, which is in the top quartile, all the other customer satisfaction ones are in the lower half. Now, I mean, I'm slightly sceptical about the measures, because, for example, these are measured through the Scottish Household Survey, and, you know, all the people that are questions are asked about, for example, the quality of schools. So a lot of the people answering that question about quality of schools will have nobody, you know, who's either works or is taught or has anything to do with schools. But then that's the same for all councils. So there's some questions for me about why are our customer satisfaction indicators in the lower half, and what can we learn from that and ensure that we improve. I've also got some concerns about inconsistencies in data. It's partly in our own data. You'll see one or two that have, particularly financially related, that have jumped up and down through the quartiles. And I think that we need to pay very close attention. I've said this to directors and indeed to the head of service for finance, that we need to be ensuring that these local financial returns, which we put in annually and which then are fed in by the improvement service to the benchmark indicators, that we're being very consistent, very clear about how we're allocating resources. I think some of the inconsistencies undermine the benefits of having a benchmarking framework like this. And I also think, and I've made this point at a national level, that if you look, for example, at the indicators for adult social care, do they really tell us what we want to know about adult social care? And this morning we spent a lot of time talking about delayed discharge, and it seems to me that that is actually a more appropriate measure of what we're doing in terms of adult social care than some of the indicators that are in there. So, a number of questions about the overall report, and I've got some quite mixed views on that. In terms of Appendix 1, indicators in the top quartile, we've talked about positive destinations. Interesting to know that sickness absence were in the top quartile. I think our view is it's not good enough, but we are in the top quartile. And the other one is perhaps the most notable there is the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, where we are second overall in Scotland. And that's, I think, testament to a sustained investment over 5, 6, 7, 8 years into into housing, which has served us well in that regard, and I think been good for our tenants. In terms of the indicators in the bottom quartile, now on page F6, percentage of pupils gaining 5+ awards at level 6, that's indicative of the challenge we still face in terms of attainment. At the bottom of page F7, the percentage of income due from council tax received by the end of the year. We're 30th in Scotland. That's not good enough. I mean, essentially, and Kevin said this morning, and this is newly in Kevin's area, but I've emphasised to him this is an area where we need to see improvement. Generally, the level of collection in relation to income tax bears a correlation to deprivation in an area. It's more difficult to collect all of the income in an area with a high level of deprivation. But in terms of deprivation, we sit right in the middle in Scotland. So our performance on council tax, in my view, should be significantly better. And that's something I'd look to see improve over the coming years. For all of those in the bottom quartile, you'll see that there's proposed improvement actions in place. And if there's issues or questions about any of them, or indeed any other aspect of the report, Chair, very happy to take these.
Thanks, Kenneth. Questions? Jim?
Just a very relatively minor comment on something that you just said there, Kenneth. You talked about the housing quality standards and how this council's managed to achieve it, and you said that it's about sustained investment over the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's actually a lot longer than that. I think part of the reason we've been able to build the houses we've built in the last 5, 6, 7 years is because our existing housing stock was so well maintained over the years. We weren't throwing money trying to recover that to get it up to that standard that were required under the quality standards that we're obliged to meet. It has been a much longer process than that.
I know. Brian?
Yeah, I've said this at a few different events and training on benchmarking, but statistics, Dan lies in statistics. It's getting to the truth behind a lot of the facts and the reasons, why something is maybe skewed as such. I remember a statistic from Newport High School, the number of people that were achieving 5 O-levels but didn't go into university education, because it wasn't about the attainment statistics, it was about the aspirations. The person didn't believe they actually had the confidence to succeed through a university course. And that is worrying. The other point, what's the point of being top of the league, if you want, for pupils going into employment, if all they're going into is temporary employment, short-term employment, and very low-paid employment? We need to know the quality behind these statistics as well as just the numbers, and that's the kind of agenda I'd like to see us progressing as well. Benchmarking should be continuously being reformed to show quality rather than just quantity.
Briefly, Chairman, essentially I agree with that. I made the point about positive destinations not just to be about statistics, it's about life chances for young people. And in terms of, and the point about aspiration is well made. If there's one word that I've used continually in the time I've been here as Chief Executive, it's about aspiration, about raising our heights, ambitious as a council, ambitious for the communities we serve. And I think that some of the good things we've done have been about that ambition and aspiration. and some of the things where we've still got progress to make show that, you know, that aspiration needs to still be in place.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we've had a reasonably good session this morning. A lot quicker this afternoon. We've got into some of this stuff. You can see that a lot of the areas we've raised concerns about are coming up the way. Invoice paid in proper time, which has been a long-standing issue with us. That's now starting to get there. We're looking, although we're still not happy in some areas with sickness absence, we're starting to get to the back of it. One of the areas that has raised its head today is the complaint system. We've had assurances by Kevin that system will be put in. There are numerous other individual areas that we've pulled away from here today. So I think we've had quite a good session today, and hopefully members will feel that it's contributed well. Could I thank you very much for your attendance? Could I thank the officers for the presentations?